So thank you all for coming. This is going to be recorded by HCTV, so hopefully the more of the community can see this. Tonight we're just going to basically unveil or talk about our essential services complex on the Creamery Road redevelopment site up here, which is going to house our Public Works Department, our Fire Department, and our Rescue Squad. Just a little history about the project and about the property. In early 2023, the spring of 2023, the select board, we had conversations about the redevelopment of Creamery Road, and we wanted to turn it into possibly a housing development, and then and create housing close to the village center. And we thought it would be a good idea, and we had a property to locate our public works facility. But then the flood hit in 23, and our plans changed a little bit. We realized that the location of the public works facility would be hard to get to because we lost roads, and the state routes were shut off. And then we had damage to our fire department, and we basically, when it floods, we have to empty our fire department, and that's no longer a viable building. So we relooked at Creamery Road again, and we said, why don't we look at the redevelopment of Creamery Road? And then at the same time, Hardwick Rescue approached the town and said, you know, we're really looking to upgrade our facility. They had searched in other areas of Hardwick and I believe in other towns for relocating Hardwick Rescue. Throughout the course of over the next year and a half, we kind of settled on the Creamery Road site was the best site for these facilities. It was central to our downtown. It was central to our the operating area for Hardwick Rescue. So we joined a partnership to redevelop this. So I'll just talk a little bit about the site, and then I'll talk a little bit about the Public Works facility and the fire department, and then the Hardwick Rescue members will talk about their facility and their needs. So obviously hopefully you all know where the Creamery Road property is. There's a picture of it up here. The southern part of Creamery Road is owned by V-Trans. We lease that space, and we have a parking lot there. So there's basically the south side of Creamery Road we cannot do anything with other than create parking, and we have plans at the depot to create trailhead space for the LVRT. So we look on the other side of Creamery Road, and we have our aging public works facility. The town garage was built in 1972, and it's really kind of a complex of several buildings. We have the main building that hosts all of the equipment, the trucks and the shop and the break room. And then we have the Quonset hut, which is cold storage for the grader, the loader, and some pickups. And then we have a newer cold storage that holds more equipment. And then the old creamery building, which has our salt shed and signs and more supplies for the road crew. This building is aging. It's reached its useful life. We had a structural inspection done this fall, and they found places that we need to look at and kind of decide whether or not we want to put any more money to making this building continue to stand up or do what we're doing today. This is a picture in the front of the building in the summertime when the plows are off the trucks. When the plows are on the trucks, they're right up against the wall. There's not a lot of room to work on the trucks because the equipment has gotten bigger. This picture on the left is a picture of one of the support columns that's rusted and twisted, and that's basically what's holding up the building. So this building is on borrowed time, and we need to try to figure out our next steps, so that's why we're here today. So our fire station, did you want to talk about some of the limitations with the town garage?
Yeah, that's fine. Hope.
Yeah.
So what we have right now, like Opie said, a lot of our steel columns that are dead center of the building that actually hold up the sports. I'm going to say the ones that are at the very beginning and the ones that are in the middle of the bay are just about all the same way. We have some in there that are just barely dangling right now. They're not really doing much for us right now. It needs all new ceiling. The roof is completely shot. That's gone. So we're looking at probably, if we had to have someone come in, we're probably looking at probably 500,000 or more just to put a Band-Aid onto this building. What we usually have during a winter time, majority of the time the floor is wet in there. And the only way we get the trucks done or work on them, we actually have to move other trucks out so we can actually work on the vehicle that we're working on. And then when we work on them, we're actually laying on cardboard. It's drier than laying in the water. That's part of the problem in there. Just the overall, there's no room. And most of our equipment that we do buy, like our jacks and stuff like that, they're all in this element with us, and they do not last. They just rot because they're bodies of our trucks, and we're just bringing in all that salt products and stuff like that with us, and it just drips all over the floor and stuff. So, but yeah, she's past the age.
And then that's a picture of the back of the building, and there's a lot of cracks in the back wall and the concrete. Some of the windows are boarded up. So that's kind of like a good snapshot of the Public Works garage. So then we go down to the fire station, built in 1965. Oh,
No.
Quonset. Okay, we'll talk about the Quonset here. So this is a historical building. It's not historical. The State Historic Preservation has looked at it. They want to try to rehab it. Anybody here tonight that wants it, we can talk about that. But we want to relocate this building. There's historical importance of this building, and we'd like it to be dismantled, rehabbed, and put up somewhere. So that is one of our goals. There's significant damage on the back, the north side of the building, just from age. But we have a whole report on the Quonset hut, but this is kind of in the way of our redevelopment. So that's the other piece of the pie. And this houses equipment. It houses our diesel tank for the light department, Public Works, and Hardwick Rescue. So down at the fire station, built in 1965 on Wolcott Street. 73. I have 65 here. And this is the first place that floods on Wolcott Street. We have to, the standard operating procedure for this is to move the trucks out of the facility when it floods. You can see the water, and what we do is open the garage doors and let the water flow through. In the flood of 23, we basically could not get to this. The vehicles were out, but there was still equipment there. We lost some turnout gear. We had to replace the doors, the heating system, the SCBA compressor, all had to be replaced. And then in 24, we were about 6 inches below needing to replace all of that equipment again. So we thought, let's get this fire department out of harm's way and move it up to Creamery Road. Currently, right now, we have this as a FEMA project, and FEMA is making us go through the exercise of what it would look like to elevate this building 3 feet above the base flood elevation. And basically, if we elevated it 3 feet above the base flood elevation, we would have to bring in fill around the whole building so we could get the trucks up into it. And by doing this, we're displacing so much water that it would be detrimental to the residential properties and other businesses around this facility. So our hope is to take the FEMA project and to take the money that it would cost to raise it up and bring it up to codes and standards and move the project up to Creamery Road. This facility has also been substantially damaged, and when something is substantially damaged, it cannot be fixed. It needs to be brought up to codes and standards, and that's the 3 feet above base flood elevation. And this is a critical facility to the town. So in other words, a critical facility, it can't be built in the floodplain, and that's where it is. So there's a lot of constraints on this building, and that's why we want to get it out of harm's way, move it up to Creamery Road. And keep going. Hardwick Rescue. You guys are up.
Okay, Hardwick Rescue, just a little thing to read for that. For nearly 6 decades, Hardwick Rescue has been the cornerstone of emergency medical care in northern Vermont. Founded in 1967, Hardwick Rescue is a 501c3 nonprofit, largely volunteer ambulance service providing 24-hour emergency response to approximately 8,000 residents across 8 rural towns in Caledonia, Lamoille, Orleans, and Washington County. Each year, more than 50 volunteer EMTs and drivers, supported by a small team of full-time or per diem staff, contribute to over 20,000 volunteer hours to ensure that help arrives when it needed most. The demand for Hardwick Rescue services have grown dramatically. In 2025 alone, we've responded to 1,029 emergency calls, 5 times the volume anticipated when the current facility was built in 1982. What was once adequate for 20 volunteers and 200 calls a year is now a significant operational limitation. The existing 2-bay building lacks sleeping quarters for overnight crews and is insufficient training and storage space, unreliable plumbing, aging infrastructure that undermines volunteer retention and staff well-being. These constraints directly affect Hardwick Rescue's ability to sustain a strong, ready workforce to meet the community growing emergency medical needs. To address the challenges and ensure long-term resilience, Hardwick Rescue has partnered with the town of Hardwick to developing the new Essential Services Complex on Creamery Road. This campus will relocate and modernize Hardwick Rescue alongside the fire department and the highway garage, strengthening coordination among essential services while moving critical infrastructure out of flood-prone areas. Extensive feasibility and scoping studies confirm that constructing a new facility on the existing site is the most responsible and cost-effective solution. The new Hardwick Rescue facility will be purpose-built for modern emergency response. Plans include 3 ambulance bays, a dedicated training and community education space, overnight sleeping quarters, shower, laundry, and adequate storage for medical and rescue equipment, designed with energy efficiency, durability, and community pride in mind. The building will support school visits, regional trainings, and public engagement, while also providing a safe, functional, welcoming environment for volunteers and staff who serve around the clock. The total projected cost is estimated at $4 million right now for our building alone, just our section. And Hardwick Rescue has committed $1 million from its capital construction fund and actively pursuing grants and public funding. Private philanthropy will be essential to completing this vision. Donor support will directly translate into strong emergency response capacity and improved volunteer recruitment, retention, and more resilient safety net for rural communities. Along with the new facility, although the new facility will be part of the Hardwick Essential Services Complex, it's important to remember that Hardwick Rescue will still be a private nonprofit 501c3. So that's kind of where we are right now. Investment in the Hardwick Rescue Squad is an investment in lives saved, volunteer supported, community protected today and for decades to come.
So,
How's that?
so now that we have, thank you, Rob. Appreciate it. It's good. So now that we have the who, the where, and the why, I want to just explain where we are in the process. So we have invested town staff and time with the different organizations. We applied for an MTAP grant, which is Municipal Technical Assistance Program, for $50,000. We hired VIA through a selective process. There
75,000.
75,000. I thought it was 50. Okay, 75. I'm always lowballing. And so 75,000, where we hired an architect, VIA. Asher Nelson is here tonight, and he'll get into the nuts and bolts of the project and some of the costs. So this is the direction that we're headed in. I want to introduce Allison Lowe with the Regional Planning Commission, who helped us with the MTAP support and to help us through this process up until now. Allison, I don't know if you want to talk about the regional
Sure.
benefit to this.
Something just really brief, but we're involved because we believe this to be a project of regional importance. So we're going to continue to work with the town to come up with a funding strategy that works, and we're staying involved. We had a number of applications for the MTAP program that Opie mentioned, and I really believe that this project was the most significant outcome from that program. So in the meantime, we're working with the committee to identify any potential brownfield cleanup costs. That will be important when we're applying for grants, part of the environmental review process. And we've put in a request to to EPA through our Brownfields Committee and our consultant for limited site assessment, phase 2 site assessment. So we're very hopeful about that. And then if we find dirty dirt, then we will
Take care
work
of it.
with the town to find resources to get rid of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Allison.
Could Allison tell us exactly who her organization is?
Yep, sorry. Northeastern Vermont Development Association.
Thank
We're
you.
the Regional Planning Commission and the Development Corporation serving the Northeast Kingdom.
Thank you.
Can I ask another, not trying to put you.
No, you're good. Yeah.
But what was it about this project that made it more interesting or more?
Well,
important?
Hardwick is one of our 3 major downtowns, and I think it's poised for a really great future. There's a lot of initiatives that have taken place in the past couple of years, and I think we're going to see more about Hardwick as growing as a vibrant community. And we feel that this essential services complex is important to be able to serve that growing community.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think I heard you say that the Creamery Road was originally thought of as a place for new housing.
Mhm.
Is that idea gone now, or?
Housing is still very much a goal of ours, and we have put several. We're working on partnering with private landowners, developers through the CHIP program, the Act 181. We've done some bylaw changes to make more infill development feasible. So housing is still very much a priority, but because of this property being central to the downtown, housing are already owned and already housing several of the Public Works Department and Rescue. Like, this is the spot that it makes the most sense.
I understand.
Yep.
Yeah.
But housing is still the state has housing goals, the region has housing goals, and we intend to meet those. Yeah. Good question. So I'm going to introduce Asher here. He's going to get into the nuts and bolts of the project, and feel free to ask questions. This is a good number of people in the crowd, and we want questions. We want hard questions.
Yeah, thanks, Opie. I'm going to mostly sit because I have to run this stuff, but I'm going to just stand up and introduce myself. Asher Nelson from Vermont Integrated Architecture. We're an architecture firm down in Middlebury. We've been around for about 15 years. We started around the concepts that you could take care of Vermont communities, you could take care of the environment. So we're very much, we work with a lot of municipalities, and we see a lot of situations just like the situation you have where you have buildings that are aging out in terms of infrastructure. They're built 50 or longer years ago, and they need to be replaced. They don't fit the equipment, they're not energy efficient, they're falling apart or whatever. So you're at this investment point where you're like, you try to take care of that old infrastructure, you invest new. What's a little bit different here is that you have 3 different programs, and we use that as like 3 different use types in your community that are all happening at the same time. So then the trick for us is to ask a question about how do we leverage that? How do we make these buildings like share some functions so we can bring the total size down? You'll see some of that in what I'm going to share here. I mean, I guess what I'll say, like, the problem was identified. So when we came on board, we were asked to solve a problem. So we've been working with a user group for 14 months. You know, there was a little bit of period over the summer where we weren't doing much, but we were hired last November, and we ended up presenting a schematic design in June, and then we came on board again in this November to start thinking about this process and how do we move this to the next step. So, you know, it's necessary for that group to work behind the scenes to come up with something to share. But this is the sort of next step, is we share this information out to the community, hear the feedback, because it's supposed to be an open process. So questions, comments, opinions are all fair game. Let us know what you're thinking. No feelings will be hurt. It's just, you know, and we're not actually sharing. Architecture happens in a process where you start with an idea, then you start with a form, and develop an aesthetic for it. And we're actually back in the how do these buildings operate in the form, but we're not really in, like, this is exactly what they look like. So most of what we're showing is pretty generic in terms of buildings, precisely because we haven't gone through that part of the process yet. We skipped over the agenda in the beginning. But much of it, we did the project overview and DPW, fire and rescue. So what I'm going to talk about is design response. And then I'm going to talk about money, right? Everyone wants to know, like, what is this going to cost? You know, that's part of it. And we'll share our thinking on that process. And then talk a little bit about possible schedule. I think Allison already did her talking about regional importance. And then we're going to have time for questions. So. And then, I guess 2 other points. I'm going to try to keep this group that we've been working on is going down into the level of, like, how many trucks and what size are those trucks and how much space do you need beside them to get in it? Like, really down into a detailed level. We've worked out how big these buildings need to be and how they function, but that's probably too much detail for the time we have tonight. You're welcome to ask questions about that, but I'm going to try to keep what I'm presenting at a bigger picture level. Just everyone's going to be grateful for that. You know, this is months of work, and we're just trying to condense it into maybe 30 minutes or something like that. So I'm going to go back to here. And when we use the term program in architecture, we're talking about the use of the building. And a program is basically an accounting of the different spaces, and then the sizes of the spaces that are required, and then some of the qualities of the space. Sometimes they need to be adjacent to something else in the building. So I don't expect everyone to be able to read the information here, but at the bottom, the summary is, I'm just going to go through each use type. So this is Department of Public Works. The summary is you currently have about 10,800 square feet in 4 different buildings, right? 10,832 square feet. So that's in the existing garage, in the Creamery building, in the Quonset hut, and in the cold storage building up there. When we worked out the program, so we're asking ourselves, what do we need to serve this community for the next 50 years? That was a 50-year building. What are we doing for the next 50 years? We came up with 13,700 square feet. So trucks get bigger, space needs increase. So that's sort of what we put down as we're starting to plan for this project. Our first solution was 12,900 square feet, so that's right around that $13,000 or 13,000 square foot target. And then as we picked up this process again, we're looking, and you'll see a lot of imagery in here that's an alternate. So we've already started asking our questions, like, what else would we do? If we had to cut some money out of this, how would we make it smaller? How can we tighten things up a little bit? So a lot of the imagery I'm going to show you is like, here's the floor plan, and if you can't afford to do that, here's a way to make it a little smaller. So there's an A and B to almost everything I'm sharing tonight. The alternate, actually, instead of having 11,000 square feet of new DPW, you have 8,700. So we've cut a couple thousand out. And one of the ways we're doing that is we're saving the cold storage building, which was being replaced with a conditioned building in the. So this is kind of like the Cadillac and the alternate. And I'm going to kind of move through these program documents, and I'll show you some plans, and it'll probably make more sense. Rescue is in quite a constrained amount of square footage right now, 2,200 square feet. When we programmed out those functions they have into a new program, it's at almost 3,000 square feet, 2,900 square feet. But there's a lot of need at Rescue that isn't actually, it's part of that shared program. So I'll show you the shared program, and most of it is actually associated, the way we've solved this problem is it's been associated with Rescue, and they may be the heaviest user of that. So that comes up in how do you divide up the cost for that shared program, right? So I'll show you the accounting as well. Simple things, like you have these 3 different programs, but because you want to share them, then simple things get a little bit more complicated, and we have to figure out some of those relationships. So the proposed full project for Rescue is about 6,800 square feet, and then when we've crunched it a little bit and tried to tighten it up, we're down around 6,000 square feet. Go to the fire department, currently exists in 5,880 square feet. When we did the program, so figuring out how much space they needed, 8,300 square feet. And then when we actually developed the design, we got in more around 8,000 square feet or 7,900. So we were able to bring some efficiencies even in the first response. And then if we cut a little bit, we can get 7,800 square feet as a target. And then the shared program currently is 0, right? There is no shared program, and there's about 5,400 square feet of proposed shared program. So you're asking, kind of, what is that? And that's everything from, vehicle service bay, wash bay. So, if you have a lot of trucks that are seeing snow and ice and they need to be cleaned, do you need 3 different wash bays in 3 different buildings, or can you share one? It's a training room, or the spaces to support a training room. And so fire and rescue for sure, and I'm sure DPW has educational events that people come together, or sometimes multiple communities come together in a training room to have some sort of, improve their skills, be able to do their work better. So there's a bunch of program like kitchenettes and toilet rooms and stuff that's associated with that. And then Rescue also relies on, I guess the sleeping rooms aren't in here. Or I guess the overnight dorm, so that's where they ended up in this program. That's why earlier it said include see shared. So there's some overlap, and I'll show you the plan so that makes sense. So then I'm going to talk a little bit about the site. I know Opie talked about it a little bit, but go in a little more depth. So this is a site plan. This is how we started to think about the program. And I guess the 2 main points I want to make with this drawing are, one, you guys know intuitively, but the whole back of the site is very steep, right? And the alignment of Creamery Road that's shown here is actually a new alignment. Creamery Road currently and legally is here. So all the buildings are pushed back, and you can't really see it. I think the corner of one of the buildings is right here. So basically, this green line is the right-of-way off the railroad. So that you drive through that site, and it actually feels like it's very spacious. There's a lot of space. But when you think about the size of this right-of-way, it's actually pushing us. It's pushing all those buildings back. If we need all these building types need what we call an apron, or space in front of the building to pull the trucks out, to wash them, to work on them, etc. So that's what these little dash lines are. So when we're pushing these buildings back, we're having to deal with the slope behind. So those are 2 things. Although it looks like a big site, the legal boundaries are smaller, and then we have this slope to contend with. And in certain places, we can make the slope work to our advantage. With part of the shared program and the rescue program needs a second means of egress out of the second floor of that, and then the slope is there to just exit out onto grade. So, Yeah, so here's a couple of drawings. These are, we call them a section, but if you slice through the building and looked at it from the side, so you see here at Fire and Rescue, the slope is running into the back of the building, so this is a retaining wall here. And then the garage level program is here, then the mezzanine, we're calling it. In this case, the section was cut where there's storage. If you went beyond this a little bit, there's a day room and dorm rooms. And then further west on the site, there's an old retaining wall, and we can make use of that. So if we don't have to build a retaining wall at the back of one of these, it's much less expensive. We can build basically just a regular frame wall. So as the buildings, their space, that retaining wall sort of peels away from the buildings. That's that old retaining wall. We can start to not have the buildings do that retaining work, and that brings the cost down a little bit. And then throughout all the drawings, you'll see we picked the colors. Yellow basically represents DPW, red represents fire, and blue represents rescue, and purple is shared. Right? So I just want to talk about how we got to how we organized the site. And basically we're thinking these are sort of different uses. DPW is working all the time. I know there's people in fire and rescue all the time, but they're actively working on site. There's piles of gravel, moving culverts around, etc. And that's slightly different than an emergency response. And actually you don't want to entangle those things because you don't want loaders moving culverts around when you're trying to get trucks out to respond to an emergency. So what our thought was is to sort of segregate the western part of the site for DPW, move the sand pile down to the end, so you'd have a salt shed, the fueling station, sand pile. This is the original design, so this is all a new building, and then there's a parking lot for first response to the fire station, and then on this end you have fire, shared, and rescue. So we're really directly taking advantage of that shared. It's like right between fire and rescue. There's doors in from both those buildings. And then for response, you can organize it where responders are coming, parking here or here if it's a rescue, and then vehicles are flowing out to the east, right? So it's a little bit cleaner, and you can kind of prevent some conflicts in response. Here's a view of the sort of 3D massing of it. I guess there's a tension between which way do we slope the roof. We were always looking to slope roofs to the south so we can put solar all over that roof and make renewable energy. In this case, the building openings had to be to the south towards Creamery Road so vehicles could get in and out. And if we slope the roof to the south, we'd be dumping all the snow and water right over the doors. So we're sloping roofs to the back, which means we'd have to be really attentive to how we conduct water away from the back of these buildings, right? And there's a fair amount of water in that hillside as well. So, all these buildings are sloping backwards. And this is so this is the full program where this is the DPW building, and then fire and rescue on this end, and then here we're calling this the alternate site massing. So you'll see cold storage is actually back there where it was, and this was intentional. We actually had what we call an alternate price as we were doing our design for incorporating cold storage into the building or replacing it with an insulated shell. But even in this, if you say, okay, we can't afford to build the entire DPW 12,000 square feet now, you could build this and then connect to that cold storage at a later date. So we're sort of trying to, we call it a master planning idea, where you think about the whole, and even if you can't build the whole, you have the next steps in mind. The other thing that happens here, and it's a little more subtle, is that rescue and the shared get crunched, like they get a little bit smaller, so you can see as they shift the slides that they move. Questions that before I move into floor plans?
Just trivia, but what is the setback on the railway, and is there any making fudge with that?
I believe it's 75 feet, and
Whoa.
yeah, it's a big setback, and I'm pretty sure that V-Trans and Vermont Rail, well, I think we even asked the
Yeah,
question.
so it's a federal rail bank, so it's really non-negotiable. If a rail carrier wants to come in and truck goods on the rail, they have to allow it. If they make the investment, the carrier makes the investment, it becomes a railroad again. So all of their rights and privileges and setbacks and is in perpetuity.
75 feet.
It's 30 at the beginning, and then in some places it's 50, and then some places it goes out to 75. And it's on both sides.
Why does it vary?
It all depends on siding. There's a siding, a historical siding here, so where they have another set of tracks where they would move cars off the rail. On corners, they have bigger areas, so yeah.
Kind of a normal straight shot is more like 30?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so there's really no negotiating with the rail bank. We have a lease in other parts of town where we cross it with sewer lines. We have to pay. So it's there.
And where on that map is the current sand pile, just so that I know where that is?
Kind of in between the yellow DPW building and the parking lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's
More-
that far in. Okay.
More from that corner that juts down over.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We are proposing parking for this facility in the railway,
I was gonna
Right.
say,
Yeah.
yeah.
and that exists today.
And trail users,
Um,
would be a shared.
And there is a little idea here, which is not really part of this project, but maybe a future idea, that there might be almost like a siding to a little picnic pavilion, so people who are using the rail trail can stop and have a picnic, or it might be a place they park and start their journey or whatever, which I'm sure happens now, but there's just no amenity there to do that.
So that could have solar on it, right?
That could have solar,
And
right?
car chargers?
And some car chargers too. Connect them together. It's just
What's the reason for having to keep the salt shed?
this is a new salt
Yeah,
shed.
but over that building there,
It's
this is,
historic.
It's creamery. It's-
what's that?
Oh.
It's historic.
This one,
Oh.
the Creamer building. Yeah, I should say that. So that,
Doesn't look
Creamery.
historic. It just looks old.
Isn't that the same thing?
Hey, look at that.
It's just the
Come on,
age
we're all
of what
getting there.
survives.
so I'm not gonna go super in depth, but you can imagine DPW is actually basically a garage for big trucks, right? So here's floor plan. The biggest part is garage for big trucks. There is a little bit of an office and break room on the end. This is in the full program. We had a dedicated work bay here, and then this was heated storage for other equipment that and then it's equipment that exists today, right? Some of it's stored in that same building, but in cold storage conditions or whatever. The alternate floor plan, keeps that cold storage building. It takes away this connector here, and then the main components are the same, right? So,
Can I ask a question at this point?
sure.
So early on, we heard that these buildings aren't big enough for their current purposes. They're not long enough for the current trucks. There
You
aren't
can't,
enough bays for
when you have our
there aren't-
ambulances parked in the.
I understand.
You can't walk around them.
I'm just reiterating what
Yeah.
we've heard. Yeah. What's being done with this plan to make it flexible enough to handle what we can anticipate now? And what is your experience as an architect, what your research into future needs of highway vehicles, rescue vehicles, trucks, et cetera, tell you about, what the expected lifetime of these buildings might be from a use
Yeah.
case?
So the trucks are getting as big as they're probably gonna, the limiter doesn't become the building, it's the roads in this community, right? We totally embrace the idea of flexible, buildings that can serve multiple uses over generations, because we actually don't know, the Creamery building wasn't designed to be a DPW storage and a salt shed. It was originally the creamery for this area, and so we used buildings differently, and the more these are actually pretty basic buildings where they're steel frame structure with the insulated sandwich panel skin, so you're getting all your R value and air sealing. Everything comes in one shot. It's there's benefits that they're very fast to erect because you're not building the wall in multiple passes around a building. And trying to limit columns, that actually tries to bring that flexibility in. And everything comes at a cost. Like if you wanted to get super flexible and make 18-foot doors or whatever, then it just costs more now. So we're trying to, there's a balance point there.
So the back wall of that building, you said, was a traditional frame. Maybe it's whatever, I mean, it's steel frame, but the wall itself is I assume metal studs or studs, but you've got it against a retaining wall where the snow's coming off the roof and the slope right into that same spot. What's your expectation
Yeah.
about how long that wall is going to hold up under? I mean, water is one thing, but
Snow load, yeah.
snow load's
No, it
different.
can dent in metal siding and stuff. We would wait till the retaining wall had diverged maybe 10 or 12 feet, so you actually had a fair amount of like, but the entire, if I go back one, like probably here is where you change. The concrete wall actually wants to return south here for strength, for stability. So probably I would change here, and then you could. That's the retaining wall there. So this is basically where the cold storage is, and there's, I don't know, what is it, 30 feet between. So there's a fair amount of storage back
The
there.
fact that you've thought about it's enough for me. We'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. So when we get to fire and rescue, this is, I'll start at the fire side again. It's pretty much a big warehouse for fire trucks. You know, we thought about the actual apparatus that you have in this community and also thought about trying to be flexible over time because that changes. But, you know, an entrance here with the turnout area. I know the fire department would like to rethink some of this. So there's more work to be done. This is at the schematic design level, and there's multiple phases of design left to do. Then there's Chief's office and break room and support space off here. So you're seeing the pattern of the big garage building and then the smaller people space attached to it. In the purple, we have, this is that training room we're talking about. So you'd come in here, there's bathroom, stairs to get up, future lift. Legally, we don't need to buy a lift right now, so, but at a certain point, you might want to have lift for accessibility to the next upper level of this. And then dedicated storage for, you know, storage for DPW if they're going to have meetings or have educational materials or whatever. It'd be here, you know, fire would have theirs, rescue. So
Training
each
materials.
Yeah, training materials and resuscitation annies and stuff. So, and then here's the rescue garage, and some of their support spaces, office and storage, internal. And then the alternate, we actually reoriented some of the spaces. So you see the training room gets smaller. You can no longer have multiple storage rooms. We have the one big storage room that everyone has to share. Some of the spaces like that, we just tried to compress everything in this shared section. Then the other thing we have is that the rescue is going to consider this third bay as an alternate. So we can design that now, and even up to the point of bidding the project and before they construct, if they have the money to build 3 bays, they can build 3 bays, and if not, the design will have accommodations for building 2 bays, but we know how that third bay will go on in the future. So we're starting to think about some of this, like how can we be, like think about contingency planning around funding. The second floor, this is all pretty much dedicated to rescue. So this is big change for rescue, which is the overnight accommodations there. You guys can speak to it better than I can, but it's like a few beds in the corner of the meeting room or
Yeah.
something. It's
Right now, we just have some mattresses basically thrown in the corner, and I have a wall, like a petition to have in an office to separate the 2 beds for people sleeping overnight. Otherwise, otherwise you're up, I guess, you know. I don't stay there overnight, luckily I live in the village.
Right. So,
The,
but here it's like sleeping quarter, dorm rooms, I guess we're calling them here.
bunk rooms.
Bunk rooms, and then a little kitchenette spot, a day room, and then some support spaces and bathroom. Right? Storage, then mechanical space. In the tighter version, all those elements exist, but they're all smaller. And as I mentioned before, we need both. It's a safety thing, but a means of egress on the upper level. So if you're sleeping on that level, you need to let people get out. And then these are just, and we call these white box renderings. And the whole purpose is that we don't, we're not 100% sure what the direction of the architecture is yet. We know that we have these big buildings, so these are concepts of how that might be organized. Wow, I'm sorry, but something's,
It happens to everyone.
yeah.
Really.
So this is that reduced version where there's your DPW, that's the existing cold storage out there, and you can see fire and rescue in the distance. And then this is from the east end of the site looking back, where this would be rescue, that shared, entrance into that shared fire, and then DPW on the far end. Yeah, and these kind of buildings are, the main features overhead doors, right? Intentionally, so that's what they're doing.
Tom, do you have a tower in the fire station for drying hoses?
No, there's a hose dryer.
I don't think we have time to talk about the budget.
Okay.
Okay.
Here it is.
I'm sure you can all read it. I will show more blown up versions. I think the point behind showing this is that this is a very detailed tool to create a realistic picture of what this project costs in the long run. And so there's a lot of different ways to break up construction costs, and people say cost per square for this or whatever, but is that just the building? Is it the building plus the site? Is it the whole project or whatever? So we're trying to be nuanced and holistic and think about all the different components in constructing a budget. So I share this to show you that that's like there's a lot of effort that goes into that. So here's the overall summary is that there's about 29,000 square feet of program area on that site. And when today, everyone knows construction is very expensive today. It's about $13 million worth of construction. When you add up all the other costs associated with what we call A&E, which stands for architecture and engineering, or owner's costs, so stuff like permit fees and insurances and temporary facilities for when you're having to move this program somewhere else in town, all the moving fees themselves, like everything. So we want to just think at that level of what are all those costs. That 13 million goes up to 14.8 million, right? Which is why we started asking ourselves about this contingency plan. Like, what can we do? And we've dropped the square footage down to around 24,800, 900, and associated construction costs comes down to about 11.4 million, and then the total project budget is around 13.1, right? No less large or daunting numbers, right? But that's where we start, because like that's how. Then it's like, how do we build the funding to match these costs? Right? That's the next step.
And that's all if Tom and his guys go out at night and shovel up the oil in the brownfield, and rescue picks up the hypodermic needles that was thrown out the back. Brownfield costs would add to that, right?
Brownfield costs are not reflected here. Actually, I think there's some of the
There's
evaluation.
about
Yeah.
2 million in site was the budget.
Yeah.
So we did put in a request for evaluation, so that would be
Yeah.
covered. Typically, since town already owns the site. If we were to find dirty dirt, we would look at a loan, but there's also forgiveness baked into that loan.
And we're not,
Yeah, as high as 50%.
this is only the beginning of the budget conversation. We're fundraising, we have FEMA dollars, but there will be an ask in the form of a loan, a bond. So we're not gonna bond or ask for 14 million or 13 million.
Yeah.
from the
And this is
taxpayer.
not, this is not something you're coming to ask us for at town meeting, you're gonna have a subsequent meeting.
Yeah.
So again, I'm showing you the components of the spreadsheet, but it's still hard to read. But this is the first part of that total project budget. Just quantifies areas. So we're back to that program, and out of that 29,000 square feet, 30% of it's rescue. So rescue is blue in all these diagrams. 34% of it's fire, and 36% of it's DPW. Right. When we look at construction costs, I don't know if we can.
I tried to do it. There you go.
It's about
It's
as
better.
most focused.
Okay.
So, we're doing this on a cost per square foot basis. We had a construction cost estimator go through our entire schematic design package, gave us a detailed construction cost estimate, and we took that to some contractors and just checked it. Have you built any fire and rescue buildings lately? What are you seeing for cost per square foot? Like, so we're trying to triangulate and get good data, and we're within that realm. We're using $375 and $385 a square foot for building only construction. I know it sounds crazy. It's actually right on the mark in terms of what commercial, this type of commercial building. If you're going to like more like an institutional building or something, the construction costs are going up from there. We've just lived through the biggest escalation in construction costs from the beginning of the pandemic till now. So this is construction costs only. You're seeing 3.2 million for rescue, 3.6 for fire, 4.6 for DPW. This is architecture and engineering. I think that says around $1 million. That says 8.3 or 8.4%. There's a lot of work for mechanical engineers, structural engineers, etc. Like that's the design and engineering portion of it. These are the owner's costs. This is all. I'm sorry, it's so blurry, but I don't think the numbers would have been too small to read in a public meeting like this. But we're thinking about everything from commissioning the buildings and testing and inspections and clerk of the works and printing and security systems and do you need temporary storage? But it's like we're trying to be really detailed about what are other component like cost items that might hit this project, and think about them now instead of having them be a surprise later. When we add all those in, and those are also split up by each program, 3.7 million. So that's kind of in line with that 4 million figure that, and I should say this budget is based on the reduced, right? Because if you add these numbers up, you're going to get to that 13.1, not the higher number. 4.1 million for fire and 5.3 for DPW. Questions on budget, or are we just stunned silence?
So, we all know that all three projects need to get done, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
How fast can we start doing this? What are our next steps? Why are we just, what can we do to move this along, I guess is my
Great question. I'm about to get into that.
Segue.
It's almost like we invited you.
Yeah. Plan. I love it. Did anyone else have a question on budget before we go? We're just gonna. Okay.
Another easy to read diagram.
Yeah.
But it shows we've given it lots of thought.
I have a question about budget.
Yeah.
How much, but we get from FEMA, if we get anything at all?
So right now, the fire station, we have an offer, a tentative offer on the table of 1.6 million for the fire station. Holding out for this exercise of raising the building and I'm gonna try to push that number up as high as possible.
What are you aiming for?
3.5. I'm aiming for what we need.
It's a good lift,
Yeah.
Huh?
We'll name it after you for $1 million.
What do you
Opportunity.
say? Good friend.
I think as Allison said, I mean, this is more of a diagram. We've been doing some thinking about how the project can unfold. I think this is probably the most aggressive or fastest schedule you could have, right? And the components here, that light orange is design activities. The green is fundraising activities, and we use the term fundraising. Some of it, that could be figuring out FEMA, or it could be a bond, or actual donor fundraising. Yellow is permitting, and then the blue is construction, right? So the story we see, these early activities happened actually last year. That was the MTAP grant supporting our early design. There was a gap in the summer, and then we sort of re-engaged. So this line here, actually this line here is where we are right now. Take that back. It might, yeah, this is 26. Yep. So the primary activity next is figuring out the dollars, right? So that's the thing. And at some point during figuring out the dollars, you're going to be confident enough to say, let's start spending money on design, and let's start thinking about those permitting activities. You know, so you have to do a certain amount of design before you can get into the permitting, and then you need to finish all the design, bidding, and then construction. And there are some complexities about how we do the construction on this site, because some of our proposed buildings are sitting on top of some of the existing buildings. I don't think we've come to consensus on a phasing strategy, and that would obviously affect funding. If you delay one of the components of this project for 4 years, you're going to deal with 4 years of inflation on that component of the project, or not have that service up to snuff in your community for that long. So, and this shows, right, that we'd primarily be doing fundraising, design, and permitting in 26 and early 27, and then start building, and the buildings would finish in early 28. These are the detail. I meant to take that out because it's just a detail about it. So that's the outgoing. That's the information we have prepared to share, and we're happy to address more questions and discussion, comments.
So our goal is to have a discussion about this at town meeting, and then we'll likely go back to the polls for a bond vote in early spring or mid-spring to try to, when we get our final numbers that we're going to ask the voters for the DPW garage. And this, one of the philosophies that I just want to share, because it's interesting to me about bonding and about public infrastructure, is the standard practice now is to get loans to pay for these buildings, so in 10 years the people using the buildings are paying the bill for the buildings. So we're stretching out the term of the loan so the actual users of the buildings and the taxpayers are actually paying for them. So saving the money, having the burden be on the people paying taxes now, saving the money and building the building, the people going to be using it, that are going to be using it 10, 15, 20 years from now aren't going to have to pay for it. So taking out loans is the current standard practice for this public infrastructure, if that makes sense.
At one point, I know Hardwick was getting negative interest loans because of our demographic, economic.
For housing.
Okay, so
We have
those things
we have several of those.
Those are not available for this kind of work at this point, as far as you know?
There's not a lot of zero interest or negative interest loans.
We've had those for water system too.
In the water system.
Yeah.
Negative interest loans for private housing?
Public housing.
Public housing.
Yeah.
And the public water system.
Yeah, the water system, we've had a bunch of those.
Huh.
I'm still new to the job. I'm still learning things every day, so.
I know at one of the select board meetings, you were talking about how much that has to go into shoring up the garage right now. What was that decided on, the
So,
money to
yeah,
spend on
in
it
the-
right now to just patch it up?
Right, that would be a Band-Aid, and it would cost, you had mentioned $500,000,
Yeah, at least.
Oh, God,
just to get it to where it wasn't structurally.
wow.
I think right now, our main thrust is this, and even though even if we are full steam ahead, it's at least 2 years out till we can move into these buildings. If we can avoid it, we don't wanna put money into the building that we're gonna tear down, that's at the end of its life, that has all these issues, so.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know if we're gonna make it, right? Like, we may have to put some money into that building just to keep it standing.
We currently have $130,000 saved in the capital fund for the replacement of the town garage.
So we haven't been putting money away for this project. We also have been talking about this project for a very long time and not making any headway on it. And so this finally, we have at least a path forward.
So the funding streams for the 3 separate parts are separate, like the bond would be for the BPW part, fire has some FEMA money, and then
Potential community facility grants.
rescue is also doing, as a nonprofit, is doing its own fundraising.
Their own fundraising and potential community facilities grants as well. We're constantly looking for grant funding, grants that match the use that we would need. Unfortunately, a lot of that stuff is changing. Rescue did apply for a congressionally directed spending request, which wasn't fulfilled, but we might try again.
Yeah.
I mean, we're always looking to spend somebody else's money, for lack of a better term. It's actually just spread out among more taxpayers.
You're right, they're very separate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm Elizabeth Dow from the Historical Society, and I've been listening to this and thinking about the history of these 3 services. So you're in for a 2-minute history lecture. In the 19th century, the town had no garage because it had no equipment. When they needed work done on roads, they hired guys who came with their teams and they did the roads, and up until very late in the 19th century, that's the way they paid their taxes, or at least parts of it. So it wasn't until equipment becomes gasoline dependent that the town started buying its own equipment. And as far as I can tell, the first town garage is down where Perry's is now. And that's where they were until after World War II. World War II, the Army has got a lot of Quonset huts that it took to Europe and it used, put all over the country, and they're selling them as war surplus. And the town paid $8,000 for that Quonset hut, and they paid like another $5,000 to put it up. And it is on the front of the 1946 or 7 town thing, and we've got pictures of the town, the Quonset hut, and all of the trucks are lined up, and the guys are just like this. It was great. That is just round number 1947, 48. Within 30 years, the Quonset hut is not big enough. And that's why they built the new one in 1972, because equipment has begun to grow. Engines are stronger, tires are better, and you can, instead of rolling snow, they've now started pushing it out of the way. They're no longer putting up snow fences because they can push it out if it covers up the road. And so they built that garage 50 years ago, and trucks just kept growing. I don't know if you've ever been up there to watch how those plows come out of those bays, but they've got like 2 or 3 inches on either side. And I think about the guys out on the road driving into snow with the plows and coming back after a 6-hour shift or whatever it is, and not pushing that building over because they're so sleepy they can't see straight. I mean, it's just amazing what those guys are able to do. So it's time they had something bigger. The fire department. The first fire department was organized in the 1890s, and their first fire department, they took over an abandoned church, the Advent Church, which is now the Grace Building. And they were in that building until they built the fire station down there in 1973. This is the first time that this town and most of these essentials, well, rescue is in the original building. There was no rescue squad until.
Then they got rid of, they got an ambulance instead of using the hearse. That's what they
The first ambulance was an old hearse.
No, it was a hearse. And they used it, dead or alive.
So
It took an hour to get to Morrisville.
that this is all coming together. And all of these places are gonna have something new. They're not taking over war surplus, they're not taking over an old church. I think it's a wonderful thing. It's wicked expensive, but what's the alternative? Thank you.
I just wanted Wiz to know that I had suggested that we use a picture of the fire department standing in front of the old firehouse for the front of our little report about this. Wiz has some great pictures of the old fire department down there.
Was I correct about the Quonset hut? I want to make sure that I was clear about the historical significance of the Quonset. I want to make sure I got that right.
Yeah, it was war surplus.
Right, but the current status of it and wanting to relook at it. Go ahead, Tracy.
Because there's only one of 6 left, right, or
It
something?
is in fact historic.
Yeah.
But it was deemed not to be significant enough that, we couldn't relocate it or.
Right.
But, I mean, we could anyway, but it's when you're using state or federal dollars.
Yeah.
Then things are triggered. So, but they were meant to be moved. They were meant to be temporary anyway. That's how they were.
I'd like to move it and put a skating rink on it.
Yeah.
I'd like to move it to the fire station and let the
Yeah.
DPW use it while they need buildings.
We can't put anything down at the fire station. We don't want to do
A
anything down there.
temporary thing?
Would you have a skating rink down there?
We could. We could. If we move the fire station, we'd like to turn that into like floodplain restoration. So. Any other questions?
You said you're gonna bring this up for discussion at town meeting. Will you take the same kind of time at town meeting to do this presentation, or?
Probably not.
But it will be available on.
Yeah, we're gonna put this presentation on our website. It'll be available on HGTV. This is recorded tonight. So we're hoping to get the word out.
You might
And
see an article on.
I really haven't
Excellent.
heard a ton of pushback on this. I think people are understand the need for this, and we're just being realistic. Bob.
Yeah, I personally like this. I personally like what I've seen here. I was here at 73 and before that, and I told them how stupid it was to put the fire station right where we just had the ice flood and the previous flood before that, and nobody listened back then. I hope they're not gonna make the town make you build the building like we had the town manager build the fire station back then. He was
No.
a full-time farmer, and he was a town manager, and he built the fire station all at the same time.
Yeah. I'm not much of a carpenter.
He wasn't either.
I was fired from my first carpentry job.
Yeah, that was his first too.
Yep.
Can I-
Yeah.
I just want to say that the select board has incorporated a first bond payment into the budget that voters will be looking at town meeting. So even though we won't have all this ready, we don't have the final numbers, we're not prepared to do the bond vote until we hope May.
Yep.
But just as a placeholder, we did put a figure in there just to say, you know, let's plan on moving this forward, and this is roughly what it's gonna cost the first year.
Oh, a whole year's worth of payments.
Well, it's a first year and it's a light year, but yeah,
And
we
is
put
that-
in, we put in 150,000, which isn't,
And is that effectively a transfer from capital funds?
it's new item.
No, because we want to use the capital funds for soft costs for the project. We got to get this done before we need a addition on the school. Just kidding. Just being realistic. Changing world. All right. Thank you
Thank you.
for this.
Yeah.
Thank you all.